The opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Invisible Wounds or Wightman. Please be aware that the content of Fireside Chats with Deborah may contain sensitive subjects such as suicide, grief, violence, PTSD, and other mental health conditions. By discussing these subjects, we will decrease stigma, bring awareness, and hope. If you need support, please reach out to trusted contacts, family, friends, call your doctor, or go to the closest emergency department. Call helplines such as Boots on the Ground at 1-833-677-BOOT. We hope this series helps build self-confidence in you. On today's show, Giuseppe Parziale, registered psychotherapist, qualifying. Fireside Chats with Deborah is sponsored by Leslie Motors of Hairston, Walkerton, and Wingham. Visit lesliemotors.com to learn more. And by
Hi, my name is Dr. Yelena Chorny. I'm a physician at Homewood Health Center and Chief of Addiction and Trauma Services.
Hi everyone, my name is Carrie Mantanga and I work as the Director of Clinical Operations across our inpatient trauma and addiction services here at Homewood Health Center in Guelph. Today, Yelena and I are so excited to share with you news about changes to our Guardians program at Homewood Health Center. One of the only facilities of its kind in Canada, providing inpatient treatment to our first responders, military personnel, and veterans, and uniquely tailored to the mental health needs of these groups. We have some exciting changes to the way the program is delivered that we're going to tell you about today.
For the last 3 years, we've been running the Guardians program, focusing specifically on treating first responders, military members, and veterans with operational stress or PTSD. And today we're announcing that we are actually expanding this program to be available to those communities and members of those communities who also have standalone depression, anxiety, or substance use without that operational stress or PTSD component. We're really excited to be able to offer treatment to more people in these communities because we know that getting treatment as part of a group of people who understand what you've been through in your life really helps to make people well. So let's talk a little bit about what to expect when you come to treatment. So when you come to the Guardians program, you'll be with us for 9 weeks. You'll be in a setting on a specific unit with other members of the Guardians program. We do it this way so that you can have a sense of safety and belonging and be able to develop trust in your peers and your team to get the most out of your treatment.
We know that the therapists and the clinical staff here have much to offer you, but we also know about the power of peer connection and how important it is for the voices of other first responders and military personnel to inform your care and for you to inform theirs. There's so much for us to learn from each other.
You'll get most of your treatment in a group setting with your peers, as Carrie mentioned. But you will also get weekly individual therapy so that you can have the opportunity to dive into the issues that are important to you in a setting that feels very safe and where you can build that relationship with your therapist.
Welcome. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Giuseppe Parziale.
Thank you, Deb, for having me here today. Thank you for inviting me here. It's such a pleasure.
Well, I'm very happy that you came. And you drove a bit of a distance.
Yes.
Couple of hours plus.
Yes, yes.
And I appreciate the fact that you made the effort to come. And you have some things to share. And why don't we start with kind of maybe a bit about your background and...
Absolutely. I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying by training. I previously worked back home in Italy as well as a psychologist, mainly in correction and private practice. I moved to Canada 10 years ago. I went through the process of my equivalency, again, my qualification and additional training here in Canada. And I have the honor to been working now for almost 6 years for Homewood Health, which I can't stress enough. It's another a big agency that advocates for first responder, which I'm passionate about it. And I work for in private practice. That have my private practice for almost a year and a half now, and it's called Rekindle Psychotherapy Services. And definitely, I need to give my wife credit for their name, which is such in tune with the work that I do with especially first responder.
Yes. Very nice name, and kudos to your wife for that.
Yes, I will.
So you've been here for a number of years, and I appreciate the fact that you mentioned that you've worked at Homewood.
Yes.
I also did 25 years there, so quite familiar with it, although it's made some changes, but I'm glad that I'm able to keep up with some of those. And very interested in the fact that you also have started a private practice. So which would you like to speak about first?
First of all, I want to thank Homewood for believing me in the work that I do. I've recently been appointed and promoted as outpatient group services clinical lead, which is giving me the opportunity to also mentor some of the new staff clinicians that we have recently hired, and to continue to do the work and the passion, and put that passion in the work that I do, especially with first responder. I think a lot of people out there know Homewood for their inpatient services. They are located in Guelph, but also we do operate on an outpatient services level, and we serve across Canada, lots of different provinces remotely at this point, and we do offer a variety of services. There are, I would say, a good chunk of our population definitely serve first responder, but also I would say regular population. Some of the services that I'm proud of to be part. For example, we do have a first responder group, CBT based, that it's only and exclusively for first responder, which I'm also the facilitator at the outpatient group services, but we also offer other services such as occupational therapy. We have in our multidisciplinary team a psychiatrist, psychologist, so we do operate in a multidisciplinary level to have the comprehensive, holistic approach to support our first responder. And recently, because I think I can't stress enough about the fact that mental health is in huge demand, especially for the first responder, the work they do. We open up also new services such as therapy at home that gives the opportunity to people to actually speed up the process of the intake and then get into our services in a faster, I would say, way. And also we do offer continuing care, like aftercare, after completing our program, group services in the evening to serve, of course, other provinces. And I think it's a good thing that I also operate in my private practice, because I can also support some of my first responders. They may be at a level where they need maybe a more intensive care, and I can recommend and refer to the Homewood services as well. But definitely all the work that I do in my private practice with Homewood, it's really driven by the passion and that soft spot that I have for first responder.
So if we break it down a little bit, now, you're from Italy, you come over here to Canada, and you started at Homewood, and it was always on an outpatient basis?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And so when you talk about first responders, just to elaborate on it a little bit, is there any professions that reach out to you more, or do you have contracts with various agencies that help facilitate them getting into counseling with you?
Sure. Personally speaking, I serve most of my clients. I would say a good chunk, good 70% are police officers, but also paramedic and correctional officer. When I refer to, I know the first responder realm, it's a bit bigger than that, definitely. We have veterans or correctional officers, so a lot of those nurses, but definitely I would say, if I have to break it down in percentage, the population that I'm currently serving, but we do serve at home, definitely a good chunk comes from police officers, a paramedic, and firefighters. And definitely there are some agencies that do facilitate such. There are some first responder that may be on an occupational injury claim with WSIB, so they are referred to Homewood for a more comprehensive assessment. Or for example, in my private practice, maybe they've been word to mouth, and maybe a colleague has referred me, another person. But again, when I talk about first responder, safety personnel, paramedic, firefighter, and police officer are the population that I serve the most at this time, yes.
Okay. So what type of modality do you typically use?
I like to look at myself as a very eclectic, holistic therapist. I do have training in CBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, narrative therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, and cognitive processing therapy. And I think it's important to look at those manualized approach as a track. And what I mean to say by that it's important to, so I use a lot of like metaphoric language in my practice, and I think I consider myself like a tailor. I want to make sure that the suit fits you properly. It's not too baggy, it's not too short, it's not too big. And I think each cases responds well to a different type of therapy. Certain approach that probably I use quite often, I would say, definitely gravitate around cognitive processing therapy, which belongs to the big umbrella of CBT modality, but also narrative therapy. And I've seen a lot of my first responder have responded well with the CPT approach.
Okay, so you and I probably know what CBT means, but I think somebody sitting at home watching this hasn't got a clue.
Of course.
And that's not to be negative about them, but if you haven't been into counseling or been introduced to it or taken courses, they might not know. So do you want to break that down?
Sure. CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and can be basically break it down in this being an antecedent, so a fact, there's been a stimuli they may have triggered, have set off beliefs or schemas, which is a set of beliefs that you have developed afterwards with respect to the antecedent, the stimuli, the scenario, whatever you witness or attend. And as a consequence of that, then you have come up with a certain behavior, so you act on that specific set of beliefs in a certain way, and there is an emotion attached to it. So if I have to give you an example very, very fast, oh, it was my birthday. My best friend didn't call me for my birthday. So that was, this is the antecedent, the stimuli. And I'm trying to break it down and very in a simplistic way, but when it comes down to trauma, it's a bit more complex than that. And then probably a belief or a stuck point, as we call in cognitive processing therapy, might be, I must be not a good friend. I'm worthless, would be the emotion attached to that. And the behaviors that comes with that may be social isolation or not getting back to your friend because he didn't call. And maybe finding after a few days that person had maybe an accident or there was something that held him back from making that call. And now there is that kind of like emotional hangover and you feel bad about that. You feel ashamed. I'm such a bad person thinking so little about my friend. That's really in a nutshell how, that's the CBT model. Now, basically what CBT we tend to do in the therapy room to facilitate, not offer, because my role as a therapist, sometimes I joke around, I don't offer necessarily the answer, but I'm the guy that asks the questions. So, and it's important to really having that honest conversation with some people that may have, different perspective around therapy. So with CBT, we try to support the person to come up with a more alternative, balanced thought that is also objective and takes into account other elements of the situations. They may have been not looked upon, or they may be disregarded, so that certain beliefs or schemas are not magnified. Because if you already have a belief about yourself, I'm worthless, all those similar situations will reinforce that and will definitely magnify. Let's say you're going through a depressive state of your life, or you've been diagnosed with depression or anxiety. Some of those beliefs may impact negatively that and make basically the symptoms worse. So kind of like a bit of a surgeon work, we try to catch, check, and change in a more alternative, balanced way those beliefs, so that hopefully some of those symptoms, depression, anxiety, and so forth, can dissipate over time.
When you talk about anxiety, depression, and that, a lot of people come in with the thoughts that I have PTSD. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that they don't have PTSD, but what they do have is like occupational stress injury or depression or anxiety? So they haven't quite got over that threshold where it's PTSD?
That's a very nice question, and thank you for bringing that up, Deb. First of all, I have to definitely emphasize that it's out of my scope of practice, diagnosing. So I don't usually operate with the DSM-5. What I mean by is I don't have the expertise to actually diagnose a person, because oftentimes I have clients coming to me, oh, I've been diagnosed with so-and-so, and I often ask, so who provided this diagnosis? So like therapist may bring it up some symptoms, so can explain to the person, I see these red flags, they're symptomatic of this, I see some depressive traits, or, I was paraphrasing around that, but definitely we cannot provide a diagnosis. Now, the DSM-5 revised definitely has specific criteria to be diagnosed with PTSD, okay? And basically how the diagnosis operates, you need to have a certain amount of criteria, such as, witnessing or being part or heard of a traumatic event, recurring nightmares, and so forth. So I think what maybe the general public can at times misinterpret as saying, I have experienced a traumatic event. And sometimes there's a lot of misconception. That's why I often encourage my clients or individual, please don't use Google Bible. Because at times can actually misdirect people and actually emphasizing, worsening even that. So just promote and foster, seek professional help. Contact your GP, because you may have had witnessed, again, a traumatic event. You may have an acute stress disorder, like mentioned in the DSM, but not necessarily PTSD. I think it's important, again, to have that honest conversation with the client, educate, and offer psychoeducation around, what PTSD is, or what anxiety is, or what depression. But I think it's very important to emphasize that there is no solution that fits all. It's, a book cannot necessarily categorize and say, oh, this person has this, and so forth. I like to think of myself, as I said, an holistic therapist. So I operate from a biopsychosocial spiritual model. So looking at all the different aspects they may have contributed to that person to develop a certain mental health barrier or going through a certain, I would say barriers in their lives. Makes sense?
Yeah. It does.
Assess thoroughly the person, because then with that, what you were saying, if there is a mislabeling or misdiagnosing, definitely there is a cascade of negative and can affect the system, the professional, and definitely the person. So PTSD, in my opinion, as a diagnosis, it's not something that can go away overnight. And that's something that when I work with my clients, when I do, for example, acceptance commitment therapy, it's a lot around explaining that I wish I can give you amnesia and take those memory away. I wish, but that's a wishful thinking. I would like to help you and support you with the acceptance that, some symptoms of PTSD may dissipate over time, but there is not an actual cure of PTSD. You basically need to grow through therapy and manage some of those triggers and some of those symptoms. And that's why when we talk about growth, we talk about post-traumatic growth. And I think a lot of my first responders that I counsel, sometimes that in the early stage, if that comes up, is a concept quite foreign to them. Oh, I should thank my PTSD for that. But actually, the growth is that you actually going through the rings and you're doing it. For example, there is the concept of being a survivor when I address, for example, sexual trauma, or there is the concept of you are a fighter. You're not giving up. You're here and doing it. Kind of like address those and being the constant supporter for the first responder, because again, I'm very passionate in my ways, because I think there's not enough done for the first responder realm at this time. I was just the other day conversing with a client of mine and noticing that there've been so many rallies outside for so many different things, so many different, right causes. But I would like to see a rally that is done to actually support the first responder. And Invisible Wounds is probably one of those agencies that is doing a lot for them. Yeah.
I think that one of the things that first responders find difficult is like picking up the phone and reaching out for help. But the other thing is that whole kind of image that they have. Well, it's not even an image. Well, I'm going to ask you instead of me trying to say it. What do you see first responders, maybe a couple of personality traits or things that are embedded in them because of their roles and responsibilities that make it exceedingly difficult for them to reach out for help?
Absolutely. I think, again, I don't want to generalize, but if I have to think about my experience with first responders, some of the, I would say, by the book traits that I find in first responders are actually that alpha type of personality and the pride that actually stigmatize even more the ability to pick up the phone and ask for help. Because I think also us as general public, we have probably emphasized subconsciously that they're superhero. Now, what I like to say, Deb, is that I think they're not. They are extraordinary people with extraordinary set of skills to bring that humanist piece of them. Because if we think it through, that superhero type of concept, I think stigmatize even more that idea to pick up the phone and make that phone call. I think it brings more of that shame and guilt. You know, unfortunately I heard it all. Broken toy, you know, damaged good, and all. I think those very negative labels, they are still dominate to a degree the culture, and I think it's important to destigmatize that. And actually, how can we do that? Is actually to bring to the surface the fact that they are people like us. They have a very hard, challenging work to do, because when the general public is asked to run away from the situation, we're asking them to actually run towards too, and that's very hard. But I think how can we help with destigmatization is actually to look at them as extraordinary people with extraordinary set of skills. And I think bringing that people component can help with that destigmatization. And on top of that, a lot of psychoeducational and advocating, promoting work around how important is mental health, because that's the other piece that comes with destigmatization that I heard a lot from my clients. I wish I had a broken leg. I wish I had a broken arm. It would be easier for my colleague or my supervisor to see that. It's tangible, of course, but what does PTSD look like? What does PTSD sound like? And I think it's important to, destigmatize a bit that and promoting and fostering more that seeking mental health support as you would do to seek support for, a flu or a broken bone or any other, I would say, physical injury. Yeah.
Do you come across first responders as individuals who sometimes really struggle with barriers?
I think that barriers goes back to, that can be of any kind. Barriers to open it up, barriers of acknowledging that I do have a problem, so I need to seek for help. Barriers in terms of they may have carry with them a set of beliefs that comes with their specific culture, background, and so forth, that I would call that kind of like barriers in a sense that maybe prevent them for actually seeking support, and sometimes it's challenging for them facing some of those barriers. Again, the stigma, it is a barrier. The mistrust that may be the psychological and social product of some of the events they have attended, some of the scene they attended, or because of the public, or because of the media, or other factors. So definitely there is another mistrust, that component. We can look at that as a barrier. But also there is the acknowledgement piece. And I think something that I address sometimes with some of my clients as part of their training, maybe that mental health component maybe can be addressed more during the training to maybe help and support them to acknowledge more, okay, these might be the red flags, so if you're experiencing any of those. So I think there is also some, genuine lack of acknowledgement. Okay, I just had an outburst, okay, that's nothing. Or a behavior that gets normalized in their mind, maybe it was a flag for something else. So sometimes there is that disconnection in terms, this happened, I've done this, but this has nothing to do with my work. So there is a gap there. And actually, I actually forgot the name of these two psychologists, which, in my opinion, are doing a great work in LA with the LAPD police. That actually a lot of like debriefing. That actually, there is a almost a 24-hour presence, a mental health person there, and has dropped dramatically. For example, the suicide rate with the LAPD. So again, having that mental health support available all the time.
And I think it's advantageous. And I know there's some police departments in Ontario that are starting this. They're really being cognizant of the fact that their employees face a lot of situations within the realm of their duties that are intensified because of the changing legislation and because of social media and all these kind of things. So they actually are implementing certain healthy things, like you said, embedded psychologists and that around, or starting up peer support groups and crisis intervention groups and things like that.
I think when we look at the impact of occupational injury, PTSD specifically, in the realm of first responder, I think we would be doing, myself as well as a therapist, I would be doing disservices if I don't consider that as a part of a systemic issue, something bigger, definitely something where collaboration, fostering mental health support, provide psychoeducational and resources is fundamental. But definitely it is important, because of the destigmatization piece, is important to, ensure that the PTSD is not seen, oh, that person has PTSD. Yes, the PTSD unfortunately is impacting that individual, but that has been the biopsychological social product of something bigger, of a system that definitely needs some review at this time. As the PTSD bill was approved in 2016, that took a lot of work. I think fostering the mental health support for first responder, we are still working hard for that, and my hope is that in the near future, the systemic issue, other parts of the systemic issue, can be maybe reviewed, can be up to date, and can be there to promote the psychological well-being for the extraordinary individual that are out there to serve and protect us. Yeah. I think if you think in a certain, if I do this, they will be serving, helping me. So there is actually a return into that. And I think it's important to consider that when we look at this issue from a systemic lens.
So if you're working with clients who come into you for counseling and you identify that part of the issues is because of, as you say, a systemic issue, what type of therapy would you do with them then? I mean, if it's a reality that you perceive that's the truth?
Absolutely. It really depends, Deb, but in those cases where we come, throughout the work, we come to a realization, this is not in my control. I definitely try to foster client autonomy in terms of decision making, and that means looking at all different aspects, financial, personal, social, all that, and making sure that autonomous decision come after a lot of reflection, a lot of understanding of pro and cons, using a decisional matrix, for example. But if we're looking at more of a therapeutic approach, acceptance commitment therapy can actually help the person, looking at what they love, the motivation, rekindle their motivation to do their work. Because I think I don't want to generalize, but I'm confident saying that I think a first responder married into the profession because they want to help. Definitely rekindle some of those motivating factor, through an acceptance commitment therapy can help. Maybe dissipate some of the anger, frustration, mistrust towards a barrier that may not be completely in their hands to solve. Yeah.
I think that you're right, and I think that some of the ways to do that has already been started, and I applaud different agencies. It's not just police, it's fire, it's paramedics, corrections. A lot of people are reaching out and looking for ways to provide services to their people Because, I mean, the reality is that there's way too many deaths by suicide still, and there's way too many people coming off sick and being sick, and that changes the whole situation within the workplace around, work hours and taking on more tasks, to get the job done. But there is changes happening within, and part of that is very reflective of the strength and the brotherhood or sisterhood within the organizations, which, I think can be utilized in a positive way.
Absolutely.
If you could say one or two things about working with first responders that has been more difficult for you, what would that be?
Definitely the trust, earning their trust and understanding. I would use the term the culture they're coming from, and believing them is the. Actually, I would add another one. Ensure that it can transpire during the session that you can handle what they need and they feel the need to say. These are some, I would say, of the challenges that counseling a first responder, a therapist can encounter. The trust, because they may have gone through a moral injury that has to do with the broken trust because of the people they relied on, for example. And now, who are you? Why am I supposed to trust in you? So you're not a first responder. You know nothing about my life. So there is a lot of work to do with that trust, and I think it comes down to that honesty and just opening it up. Sometimes, as we say in therapy, using a effective use of self, meaning sometimes creating that bond, that personal bond with the first responder. How maybe you can feeling-wise relate to certain things to create the therapeutic relationship. So almost sharing, of course, within the premises, as I said, of the effective use of therapy, that, okay, maybe these person can actually understand where I'm coming from. For example, something that I am a really big advocate of, ways to fill the gap between the first responder and the therapist, participating for ride-along, for example, that I applied for, or maybe going to a range and understand what doesn't mean holding a firearm, and not just for pleasure, but to understand, okay, this is actually how it feels. I know it's not the same thing, and I want to emphasize this, but just to, again, fill that gap as much as possible between a member that I am of the general public and a first responder who's out there, serve and protect the public, going through so many different things. The mistrust. As I also said, another component is maybe therapy in the past hasn't been as effective as they wished, which has created maybe mistrust in the therapeutic process in general. The stigma piece, so opening it up, so I may feel judged. So having that honest conversation can probably support demolishing the barrier of mistrust. Another barrier that I mentioned before, how can I make sure that that during the session it transpires the fact that I can handle? I think, again, first responder, public safety personnel, that are individual that they're quick at picking on emotions and stuff, so that's what they do. And so it's important to, having as a therapist those inner skills to ground yourself and be able to manage possible transference or counter-transference during the session. That's another challenge that I've done some additional training. I continue to read as much as I can, and also my experience helps me with knowing more about the culture too, because I have not stopped learning. I'm still here learning from most of my first responders. Yeah.
Yeah, it is amazing the gifts that they give us when they open up and talk about the realities of their job.
I would say a line that I like to say is, vulnerability and courage are two sides of the same coin. In order to be vulnerable, you need to be courageous. And when you open it up, you actually are not showing weakness. You're showing, to me, a great amount of courage, because you are feeling comfortable to show the vulnerability to me. So and that's when I help them to kind of like, again, really demolish the piece of stigma that, oh, if I open it up, I'm weak. Yeah, that's another stuck point, beliefs that oftentimes I encounter in my work with first responder.
Have you ever had a situation where you've had a first responder referred to you, and then they're in a relationship and the partner wants to be involved when maybe it's not the best thing?
Yes, I did. In the cases specialized more on individual-based counseling. So in those cases, if I do believe that clinically speaking, there would be an advantage in having couple counseling, definitely I refer the couple to another therapist. But yes, I did have a similar situation where, because of a release of information barrier, maybe the husband or the wife, they have not given that permission to speak, or maybe another situation where both parties of in the relationship of both first responders, so it might be kind of like a triggering effect, like domino effect. So in those cases, again, I always tried, when I identified that as a barrier for treatment, so refer and expand definitely the therapeutic process. So referring, for example, continued individual counseling, and refer the couple to a couple counselor with that couple counseling expertise with first responder.
Is there any, it sounds like a lot of social workers or counselors are specializing now. How do you think, if you're a first responder and you're kind of sitting there and thinking about addressing something that's been bubbling up inside, what should they look for in a counselor? What can they expect?
I think it's an interesting question, because it's something that I've been asked so many times. For example, when I need to refer an individual in the community, and because really I think I encourage first responder to look at the bio of a therapist, and most of therapists, they do offer an initial conversation free of charge, 15-20 minutes consultation. I think using their strength to read people, so to speak, to see if they can be a good fit for them, but also looking at their experience, if they're trauma informed, if they had previous experience with first responder, if they have specific certification, they're trauma informed base. I think right off the bat, those would be my suggestion to look for, to look into a therapist. Of course, that might not work, because I think having that therapeutic relationship at the beginning, it's kind of like dating. At the beginning, it may work or may not work. But I think something that I would like to emphasize, and some research backs me up on that most of the work is done through establishing a solid therapeutic alliance. 80% of the positive outcome is based on establishing the positive therapeutic alliance. So I think looking at a therapist that has quite a bit of knowledge of the culture and experience can, again, be my biggest advice, and say, okay, and not to discredit any of my colleagues out there, but that's why each one of us has a specific set of intrapersonal skills and training, so that we can help different individuals, there's populations out there. Yeah.
I want to thank you for being here, but before you go, I'm really kind of interested in the private practice that you're doing. You've talked about your work at Homewood, and
yeah, my private practice, as I mentioned at the beginning, I have to thank my wife for, It's called Rekindle Psychotherapy Services. I do provide hybrid services, meaning in-person and virtual as well. And in-person services are currently operated from Complete Integrated Care. It's a wellness family clinic located in Bolton and Landmark Plaza at 186 McEwen Drive East.
Good. So roughly, if you take a look at your clients right now, what percentage would you have that are first responders versus civilians?
As of right now, I think it's a 50-50. I think it's honest to say 50% first responder, 50 general population.
And you have your first responders are typically referred from external sources, i.e. either EAP or...
Yes, can be, or word to mouth as well. Okay. Yeah, or other professional refer them to me. Yeah.
Okay, good. And are you doing things in the community to kind of support?
I'm trying. I have to say I'm working hard to advocate for first responder with Toronto Police or a fire department in Toronto to offer like free workshop and services to again advocate for mental health. Still a bit of a work in progress at this time.
Oh, okay. So you're actually offering to go in and what, do a session or?
No, just a free workshop about supporting mental health amongst first responder.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, how would they contact you? Say it was it would be the health unit, I guess, within one of those organizations that wanted to reach out to you.
Google me, find me services, my website or Psychology Today.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much, and I wish you the very best with your business.
Thank you, Deborah, for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. To begin, sit comfortably in a chair or lie on the floor. Place one hand on your stomach and the other hand on your chest. Gently close your eyes and bring your awareness to your breath. Take note of the pattern of movement of your two hands. As you breathe in and breathe out, does one hand move more than the other? Now take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Exhale fully through your mouth so that you feel your lower hand moving inwards. Relax your shoulders. Loosen your jaw. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Continue to breathe in deeply and exhale fully, focusing on your breath. As you inhale, focus on moving your hand outwards on your stomach. As you exhale, focus on moving your hand inwards on your stomach. Feel your lower back pressing into the back of your chair or towards the floor. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Take one last inhale in and exhale. Notice how you feel. Thank yourself for taking time out of your day to practice self-care.
Asking for help, because so long in my service, over 40 years at that time, we were always giving help to other people and listening to their problems and solving their problems. And of course, coming from a culture of push on and put your head down and continue was not conducive to telling your own story. So once I was able to get through that and tell my story, it became much easier. But for many first responders, and particularly myself, that was the hardest thing, just asking for help, because we've always been told we can push through. For me, it was not understanding the process completely. It was a lot of unknowns, and the fear of the unknowns, particularly with me and other first responders, is pretty significant. And one of the things that I noticed, that the setting and everything at Ravensview was there to calm us down and to get to the root of the problems that we faced. Understanding my PTSD, that was one of my biggest challenges. And it came to me quite suddenly when I was in treatment my first week. We were asked to rewrite a traumatic episode in our lives. And I had served in the former Yugoslavia as a UN peacekeeper, as a member of the RCMP. And on the 21st of November, 1994, we were ordered to be evacuated from the town that we were stationed in. And I didn't know it at the time, but that had a profound effect on me, because the people in the town thought that the armed forces were coming in and going to kill them. And I'd always thought that PTSD came from an incident that actually occurred to one. And many years later, I found out that that incident, having to leave those people in fear for their lives, really had a dramatic impact on me. So much so that when I wrote about it in Ravensview, my 4th day into treatment, I had a flashback. I was right back in that Croatian village with those people crying and screaming and wanting help. So it came to me quite quickly and quite profoundly, but I'm glad it did. I can't answer for other first responders. I can answer for myself. First of all, we come from a culture of do it and help people even when there's danger. So when it's time for us to ask for help, it's very, very difficult to do. And the other thing is that we don't want to relive some of those memories. I know for myself, having to relive them was almost as bad as actually living through them the first time. I was successful in putting them away in my mind, and having to bring them out in the open was really difficult for me. but I was really fortunate that I had an excellent group of physicians, psychiatrists, and therapists to help me through that. And Ravensview provided me that ability to get down into what my issues were, particularly around PTSD. Started right away when I turned off the road and wound my way up to the top of the hill where Ravensview was situated. I actually stopped at the sign at the bottom at the road and wondered if I really truly needed this. I had a couple of minutes of reflection, and then I was determined to continue. So what's special about it? It's in its own place. It's at the top of a hill surrounded by a forest, and to the north is Victoria Airport and a very scenic Gulf Islands. So I'd say the setting is really, really important, and it sure helped me. The other thing is too that the campus, as I'd call it, of Ravensview, is more like a university setting than a hospital. We're treated like adults, and we are given lots of opportunity to discuss and go over some of the things that brought us to Ravensview. It's a very welcoming environment, and which includes all the staff, not only the medical staff, but also the cleaning staff and also the therapy staff. They are welcoming, and they are aware of some of the things that we've gone through and can help us with it.
Invisible Wounds will host events promoting mental wellness to first responders, their families, and civilians. To find out more, please visit our website at invisible-wounds.ca.